At this time, I'd like to call this workshop of the School Board of Monroe County and our legislators to order. And I would like to introduce our legislators. First of all, we have Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally. And Mr. McNally is the 5th and current Lieutenant Governor of the state of Tennessee. He represents the 5th Senate District of Anderson County. And what are the counties?
Anderson, Loudon, and part of Knox.
Part of Knox, okay. And he's a resident of Oak Ridge. He served in the General Assembly, or he has served in the General Assembly since 1979 as a state representative, and then he moved to the state Senate in 1983 and has served there until he was elected Lieutenant Governor and Speaker of the Senate. What committees do you serve on, Mr. McNally?
I don't.
I wondered about that.
I
get to
I get to appoint all the committees and
Okay.
appoint the officers, and then there are some national committees I serve on with the National Lieutenant Governors Conference and things like that.
Okay. All right. And I'd like to introduce you to Senator Mike Bell. He lives in Riceville, and he serves District 9, which includes Bradley, McMinn, Meigs, Monroe, and Polk County. And prior to serving in the Senate, he was in the House of Representatives. And what committees do you serve on, Senator?
Judiciary, Energy, Ag, and Natural Resources, and I chair the Government Operations Committee.
Okay, thank you. Representative
And I should say, at his pleasure.
You serve at his pleasure. Okay, Representative Jimmy Matlock is here from Lenoir City, and he serves District 21, which includes Lenoir City, parts of Loudon and Monroe County. He's owner of Matlock Tire Company, and he makes tracks all around this area. Could you tell us what committees you serve on, Jimmy?
Thank you, Janie. I do serve on the Education Committee and the Consumer Affairs Committee.
Okay, thank you. And we have Representative John Fogarty from Athens, and he is serving District 23, which includes Athens, McMinn County, and parts of Monroe. And his background is he has served 40 years in public education and served in the Tennessee National Guard for 20 years and was deployed to Iraq in 2004 and 2005. He is an auctioneer, and I grant you that if you're ever in one of his auctions, he can cajole you to get the last penny out of your pocket. Okay.
I'm also a recovering superintendent of schools.
Oh, that's right. You're still in recovery. Huh? All right. At this time, I think we'll get questions from the Board of Education. The board members, let me introduce them. This is Miss Jo Cagle, Marcia Standridge, Sharon Freeman, Sonia Lynn, Dr. Jason Miller, and Faye Green. So, let's have some questions, people. Board.
Can I start?
Yeah, please do.
One of the big things that my constituents tell me and teachers tell me that they don't understand how anybody in our governing body could be supporting vouchers for public, because it goes directly in opposition, the way we see it, to support our public schools. Money is being taken away to send a kid to a private school, taxpayers' money, sends them to a private school, and there's not, studies have shown that they don't do a whole lot better there. I just don't understand, me personally, how if you've got a failing school that you wouldn't want to pump in that money to that school for all the kids, not just a select few. And not only that, the money it will be taken away. We get BEP money for every student in our schools, and that student's gone, and we're losing $7,000 per kid that leaves our school, about $7,000. So can you all tell I want every one of y'all's position on vouchers, because I can see there's a lot of people down here that are saying vouchers. So can you give us your thoughts on that? Anybody? I don't care. Somebody start.
Well, I'll be happy to start. On Wednesday this week, your representatives from the school and this county came to Nashville, and we had an opportunity to have probably John an hour, I guess, with them in our committee time. They came to the education committee, and then we got to meet with them privately afterwards. And that question came up. We talked a lot about that. I'm not sure we ever got to an answer that we totally agree with each other. I will tell you that I believe you can be an incredibly strong supporter of public education, which I certainly am, and also want the opportunity for choice and have the opportunity for parents to have the choice. I think at the end of the day, we all want the right thing and the best thing, which is for the child. The question is, should we allow the family to make that decision and let the money flow with the child after the parents have had input on that? And I think in a sense that the competition is certainly something that has helped almost every other area of our life. We have competition in where we shop, competition in opportunities in almost every buying circumstance we have. So I don't see that in any way as a threat to public education. I know at the legislature we have people who have been certainly themselves educated in public schools like I have, but chose to put their children in other forms. There's folks that have done Christian education, which I have. There's others who have done homeschooling. Others have done charter schooling. So I think what many have said is, let's see if there could be other opportunities for that child to be, since we all believe the child is different, many aspects of every child can be in different ways. But I guess in a nutshell, I am a believer that the parents and the family could and should have the opportunity to have a chance to choose. And that's why I would be in favor and have said from the get-go that I'm open to that idea.
At this point in time, I would like to ask you to refrain. This is our workshop with our legislators. You're welcome to stay here and you're welcome to listen in, but please don't voice any opinions, whether you agree or disagree. Let's be respectful. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I do support vouchers, and my education has basically been public education through junior high, high school, kindergarten. I went to a public university and a public medical center for my pharmacy degree. And it's for children who are basically sentenced to a failing school. They live in an area where they have to attend a school that is extremely low performing. And the state has put extra money into the school districts to help them take care of it, but for one reason or another, it continues to be a failing school year after year after year. And it's limited. I think the bill that probably will come out of committee in the Senate, it's limited to the 5, or probably the worst schools in the city of Memphis. And while it does take the BEP money and the BEP match, but it does leave the local supplement that they add in addition to that, that still stays with the school. So it's not the entire amount of money that's paid that follows the child, but the majority of it. And it gives, I think it's not something we mandate. The parents have a choice. They can continue to send their child to a failing school, or they can send them to another school which is a private school but is probably doing better. And in that environment, I think the child will do better.
Can I ask you a question here?
Uh-huh.
How do you choose? I mean, is that for all the kids have that choice? I mean, is there money for vouchers for all the kids that might be at a failing school? I mean, the parents, I say 100% of the parents want to send their kid to a better school or a private school. Does all the money follow them and then that school shuts down? I mean, what happens to the failing school?
First of all, it's limited to children that are below the poverty line, at or below the poverty line, obtaining a free and reduced lunch, I believe. And so that doesn't probably hit all the children. And it's up to the parents. There will be some that choose to leave their child in that school. I don't think the school will close down. It will probably lose some of the students. But as far as it closing down, I don't think it will. And they are having problems in Memphis with schools that are, because of the shift in demographics and everything, they have to, a school that was once well attended is now not very well attended.
May I ask a question? So
Uh-huh.
are you saying that if I'm a parent of one of the upper kids in a failing school, in other words?
Upper income,
No, upper academic.
But it might, maybe a poverty
Yeah,
parent,
it might
but
be a
if,
poverty community, but an academic situation, the child is very, very much college material. They're gonna be discriminated against because they don't get the voucher. Is that what you're saying?
you mean if you're above the poverty level? They did that because they felt that a parent who was above the poverty level could probably afford to send their child to a private school. The scholarship or voucher really is for children whose parents can't afford, and basically because of their location, they're locked in to attending a school.
well, you see what Faye's saying? Faye is saying that if you've got a kid that's really smart,
Right.
but, college material, but if they,
Are
are not,
financially.
financially needy, then they get discriminated
They get
against, if they have to stay at the failing school. I mean, you see what we're saying?
They don't have to, technically, they don't have to stay at the failing school, because if they're above, the free and reduced lunch level, the parents probably have enough income to pay for tuition to send the child to a school that's not failing.
How does a kid that's on below this poverty level, how do they get transportation? I mean, is that provided in these how would they get to another school?
There is transportation money that's provided for the student, and that transportation money is part of the BEP formula and goes with the student.
Well, I just feel like that it's just a crack in the door to where it starts in Memphis, but then first thing you know, in a few years, it's all over the state, and we are struggling. We struggle with our budgets and trying to keep materials for school and smart boards and the whole bit. I taught school for years, Faye taught. We've got a lot of former teachers in here. And I just know how we were always needing money, and you take students away through home schools or private schools or vouchers or whatever, and the public schools suffer. They suffer.
Is it fair that a parent of means can take a child, let's say this child's in public schools in Min County. Is it fair that a parent of means can take that child across the line into another county school in another county where they think their child gets a better education, and the parent who maybe doesn't have the means can't do it? That's going on now in our public school system, and I'm proud of the parent who can do that. It's happening in southern McMinn County. We've got 50 or 60 kids at Walker Valley High School because they feel they can get a better education. It's the same situation. We allow it in public schools, and it's the same situation with this very limited voucher program that Lieutenant Governor McNally is speaking about.
Okay, John. I see a frown on your face.
Well, with all due respect to my colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I am not for vouchers. I spent 40 years in the public school business, and I think, to me, it's wrong to relegate public tax dollars to the private sector, where the oversight, the accountability, and the transparency is not the same at all. And again, I don't have better friends in the world than these right here. I think and again, I'm not particularly objective on this issue because I spent so much time in the public school system. But the voucher program in Ohio, Indiana, and Florida, and Louisiana all started as a pilot project in one city, and now they're statewide. And that's a biased Fogarty opinion. Everybody understand that. But to me, and I would absolutely support every parent's right to send their child to a private school. I support a parent's right to homeschool their children, to educate their children in the way that they think is best for those children. What I don't believe in is that the taxpayers ought to pay for it. Now, that's just biased Fogarty opinion. With all due regard to my friends.
That brings up another question and a problem that we have seen here in our own county about parents who come in for truancy and they get ticked off about it and they decide they're gonna homeschool their children.
This is a problem.
And this is a big problem here. And these parents are not qualified to homeschool. Now, granted, it's a choice, but here's the thing. I had a niece who homeschooled her 2 children. She had a degree from Maryville College in elementary education, and it's been 11 years as an officer in the Navy. She was perfectly qualified to homeschool them. But the majority of people, and you only have to have a GED or a high school diploma, and I'm not saying anything against a GED or a high school diploma. I'm just saying that not too many parents are qualified to homeschool their child. So what we need is some way to put some teeth into this or something that can help us to discourage this. And I think, John, is it you, or seems like I saw a bill, or maybe where it is, I think it's your bill, John, where there is a level of, progressive level to deal with truancy.
Yes.
Yes, okay, I knew it was yours. And that might work. Of course, that's gonna be extra work on the school system too, which we're already inundated with paperwork.
That particular piece of legislation was brought to me by the Juvenile Justice Task Force.
Uh-huh,
And that by the judicial system.
I understand.
It includes 3 tiers
Mhm.
of interventions
Right.
prior to, for public and private schools, prior to relegating them to a juvenile court system. And a big part of what that bill asks for, many school systems are already doing. But it quite simply is an approach to address truancy through a therapeutic approach and a counseling approach instead of a punitive first step court system approach.
We already have like 2 steps before they go.
Sure. And most school systems do have a truancy board or something like that that addresses a number of those issues before they ever go to juvenile court or general sessions court.
But the homeschool, if you just put associate's degree, I'm just talking about Monroe County,
Right.
you wouldn't have any people going to homeschool that wasn't qualified.
That would cut down a lot on it.
I'd say 95% or better.
Well, and I'll repeat something my friend said here a minute ago. He said he is biased from his 40 years of public education. I'll tell you, I'm kind of biased because my wife and I homeschooled 5 kids. And, you know, on this subject, I can tell you, and I just didn't think to look them up, and I could have brought them with me, but there's been numerous studies that show there's absolutely no correlation between the education of a parent and the academic success of the child in homeschooling. You would think there would be, but there's no correlation. Now, my wife's got a degree in elementary education. My 3 oldest ones all 12 years. My other 2 did a combination of homeschool, private school, and public. My youngest one even went to spend 1.5 years at Walker Valley. But there's no correlation between the education of the parent and the success of the student. I will tell you, we've got a problem when you've got parents who are pulling them out of the public school to avoid an issue. Now, we had a judge in Knox County a couple years ago that when a child was brought to him with truancy problems, he was actually telling the parent, "We just need to take this child home," and was sending a problem student for the public school who's now a problem student in the homeschool. I don't know what the solution is. I don't think it's requiring higher education levels. But again, because, and I can provide them for you, the studies show there's no correlation.
Well,
Okay, now one thing is though, these kids need to be, are they tested? Do they have to come in and take it?
They test the fifth grade.
It depends on how they homeschool. In Tennessee, you can homeschool either through a church-related school, which 90 to 95% of the kids who homeschool through church-related school, or you can homeschool as independent homeschooler, and those are the ones that have to register
Yep.
with
I
the
know
county,
these
which
kids.
with the overall number, it's very few. That's very
Very
few,
few.
and those do have to come in and take the test. The ones who register through a church-related school have to take whatever test that school requires, just like you'd be registered with a private school. Whatever, I don't know what private school.
We got like Cross Creek.
Cross Creek would be
Sweetwater,
one,
It's like a
yeah.
level 4
Yeah,
school.
that would be one.
Well, I can speak personally, when I had several kids that had been homeschooled, I taught in high school. They would come from a homeschool situation, and I might have them as a freshman in physical science, or I had a few that would come in as juniors, and I had them in chemistry. And I would say 80% of the time, probably the 80-20 rule, 80% of the time, they were not, the ones I got, were not up to where they needed to be as far as in my subject area. And we had problems. We
Yeah,
had
and
some
I would say though, you were having the kids where the parents that's why they ended up in public school. You weren't seeing these kids who are getting the scholarships to Harvard and Yale and places like that who have been homeschooled all 12 years.
But those kids are being taught by qualified people. Our kids in this
Yeah,
county.
I know a parent in McMinn County, a mother of 10 kids with a high school education who's got doctors, master's degrees, people teaching at the University of Boulder, Colorado, who homeschooled their kids with a high school education.
Well,
And I know that happens,
Right.
that's not the rule.
Yeah, I mean,
That certainly
I'm
isn't the
saying
rule.
what y'all saying is not the rule.
Okay, when they go out and they homeschool, and then they decide they wanna put them back in our schools, and they come in and they lack the skills, then that brings our scores down, which evaluation
understand.
enters
That's a problem.
into that, and that's not fair. And so.
Well, it's not fair either that those kids can go be homeschooled by somebody that's not qualified, and if there is no correlation between qualifications to teach and homeschool, why are we requiring it in the high school? Our high school teachers have to be certified to teach. So you're saying that any kid can just go out here to a non-qualified, and there's no correlation that they can do just as good a job as certified teachers? That's
Well,
just
it's
not
a little,
fair.
it's a little different when you're looking at a 102, 103, or 104 than you are dealing with, I don't see how teachers deal with 20, 25 kids. I think y'all are miracle workers, having to deal with that, especially kids who are not your own. And I understand that, but
It's
dealing.
easier if they're not your own.
Yeah. Well, not yours personally, yeah.
You can go
Well,
to jail
Yeah.
if you treat your own sometimes.
Mike, from what you've said, it sounds like that you don't have a lot of faith in our public schools.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, I interpreted that.
Well, you interpret it the way you want to. Okay? Now, I didn't come here to be lectured. I came here to talk about issues.
No, we're talking about it, but the point of the matter is, we all have an opinion, and we need to respect each other's opinions. But, anyway, is there any other questions any of you have?
Yeah, back to the vouchers. If we take a low-income child and give him his nearly $7,000 of our VPP money to go to a private school, and that private school is $15,000 tuition, who's picking up the balance?
Ms. Green, I've got a little bit of an idea about that, and let me digress for just a second and say, I have a sister who's a public school educator, I have a daughter-in-law that's fifth grade public school educator, and I want to leave here tonight with everybody knowing I believe in public education, and I believe what is done in this room is vitally important, and what's done in the classroom is even more important. But because our children went to Christian school, and I think there's a little distinction between private school and Christian school. We didn't pull our children from public education. We placed them in Christian school to reinforce what we taught them in our home and our church. And I think there's a vast difference between running from something and reinforcing something, and that's what we chose in our home to do. No way do we intend that to be a disrespect, because I have it in my own family of the people that I dearly love and with constantly. Because I have a little exposure to the Christian side, I see a sign over here about Webb at $18,000, and that's true. I'm very familiar with Webb, but be also aware that Webb has what's called scholarships. And yes, they do take children just like we're talking about. So did the school our children went to, which is CAK. They offer, as a parent, I had a chance to contribute to that scholarship, and did. I didn't just contribute to the football team and the track team and the arts council. I contributed to a scholarship fund where we helped families who could not afford to go to that school, just like Webb does. So there is a way in Memphis, Tennessee, and I want to be sure that this gets said. When I spoke in Loudoun County 3 weeks ago among some of my best friends, and we grew up together, we know each other well, and they have served admirably on the school board. And they came with every bit of intensity of the questions toward me that night, and I appreciate their spirit as I do yours. But I said to them, I can't get out of my mind, if this bill that we're questioning applies only to Memphis, Tennessee, in a select situation. If I'm a grandmother, and many of them are, raising a grandchild without a mom in the picture and nowhere to be found as their father, and we continue saying for 35 years, just a little more money, just give us a little more money, just pour us in a little more money, guys, and we have. But that's not working. Now, we don't have that problem in this county because we have great teachers and a great school board and a great system. But what do we tell that grandmother in downtown Memphis who's raising that child? All she can do is to get him up in the morning, get him dressed, and send him somewhere. But before God, I don't want to tell her, man, we're just going to give you a little more money. That didn't work. It hadn't worked in 35 years. So I'm open to another choice. And if it's a voucher, then I'm going to stand up and vote for a voucher, and have. It is something we've got to do differently than what we've done to those children in that area. And it's not in our community, and I don't think it's the nose under the tent. I've heard that 100 times. This is one opportunity in that circumstance. And if I'm going to sleep at night, I'm going to give that child and that family a chance. And if this is the place that we can try that, I'm going to vote for it again. And if we disagree on that, I'll respect your positions. But I want to know that I've done all I can do at the end of the day to help in that circumstance for that child.
Well, isn't this just, this voucher bill that's on here now, is this just a kind of a
Pilot.
trial basis for
Pilot.
Shelby County? Okay, it's not any other place in the state.
It
No.
does have, I think Shelby County applications only, if I'm familiar with that. That right, John?
Yeah.
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 But as Sean said, it can.
I'm
stream
sorry?
right- I said, as you said, it can stream right over into other places.
And it can fold away too, go away.
He's got to be.
I mean, you-
I do have a question, again, about vouchers. As Mr. Matlock said earlier in his earlier answer about competition. And so I think a lot of people want to know, we've mentioned about helping, people in a bad situation, but one of the things about vouchers is we keep hearing is competition will create better public schools. And, of course, I don't think we all see that. I know I don't see that, but how is that competition going to help public schools through a voucher system when obviously we're losing DEP money from that?
I can tell you how it works in the private sector. I have a business location in Fairview, Tennessee. In 1980, I went there. It was me and Firestone. Today, there are 27 competitors within 2 miles. You don't think I get up in the morning wanting to work harder, asking my team to work harder? I come up with it somehow. I thought I was working hard in 1980, in 85, and 2000. I've had to adapt. I've had to do a different business model. I've had to encourage my people to get better training. Competition will make us better, or we'll go out of business. So I think that can apply in this circumstance. I know teachers are working hard. I know the school board is empowering them to do everything they can, but I can promise you, there is a level at which we will get to as human beings. When we're threatened with somehow existing or not, it happens in the private world. It happens at the lamppost down here. It happens at the Shell station. Competition will make us all work harder and try different things. And I think in a sense, that's where we do have an opportunity. Maybe we don't see it now, but there's an idea out there. There's another way to do things and still not blow up or disrupt what we're doing right in this community.
I appreciate that. I'm a business owner as well, so I understand competition. But I'm trying to understand how, one thing about competition is it's kind of hard, I guess, if there's not a level playing field. And so, I know we can ask everybody to, you need to work harder. You might need to stay after school a little bit longer and those things. And certainly you've probably done it in your business. I have mine. Those are things that we do. But when you're losing, your funding because of that voucher, to me, that's it's hard I understand the competition, but it does seem like the playing field is not as level as it was if you did have that money there. So,
I've not understood, and maybe Jimmy and John who served on the education committee and looked at this a little closer, but I don't understand how you can be losing money. Now, when you lose 10 students, you lose the cost of educating those students as well. Okay? So you lose the $7,000 in BEP money, but you keep the $2,000 of local money. So you've got a net gain of $20,000 without the cost of educating those 10 students. So how financially does that hurt a school? Now, that school may have to downsize some.
You'll lose teachers.
Yeah, you'll lose teachers.
Well, okay, that school may have to downsize some, but you're making $2,000 a student for everyone that leaves in money that you have no cost in educating a child.
Well, another thing too, for all of you is the fact that I see charter schools as I guess just a corporation in a way, because, public schools, school board members are elected, and they're elected by the people. And if the people don't like what the school board's doing or that particular school board member, they don't vote for them. They run somebody else if they think can do a better job. And charter school boards are appointed. There's no answering. Who do they answer to?
Oh, now charter schools are different from schools that accept vouchers.
Yeah, but
Charter
if they
schools.
get vouchers, Randy, can't they go to a charter school?
Yes.
They don't have to be certified teachers either.
They don't have to be
charter schools.
certified teachers.
Yeah, a charter school, as I understand it, is set up by the county or city, and it charters it as a school, I think.
Chartering authorities do indeed have to request, they have to go through the local school board.
Yeah.
But,
We'll go to policy.
Yeah, they, to
It
get
keeps like a
approved.
3-page policy.
exactly, but to Jason's point,
Mhm.
in my opinion, the playing field is not at all level. And again, all due regard to every opinion here. In my opinion, when you provide pupil transportation, when you provide, educate all children, special needs, all ethnicities, then, in a voucher setting, we're comparing apples to apples. When you only accept youngsters that a private school can choose to accept students and choose not to. A public school cannot do that. A public school takes everybody that shows up on that bus at 8 o'clock in the morning. Everybody. And to me, public education in America is the big equalizer. It just is. And I know there's differing opinions here, but to me, for every piece of research that shows how successful voucher programs are, there's a piece of research that shows how unsuccessful they are. So the jury's still very much out on the whole issue.
Well, I've read
And
some- Right, well, I've read some things in the Florida school system. I have grandchildren down there. And the voucher systems have not shown, at this point, to be better than public schools. Now, the ones I've maybe read the wrong ones, but, you know.
And it just depends on who you're listening to.
Right,
For every piece of research that says vouchers are good, there's another piece that says they are not. And it just,
Well-
there's no definitive research that says absolutely and positively it works. And again, if people want to send their children to a private school, that's their business. I
right.
don't think we ought to be paying for it with tax dollars. That's my opinion.
Well, I think our public education is what's made this country as great as we are, because it is the one way our society can hand out choices to a lot of kids that don't have a choice. That's their only hope of getting to learn how to read and having a chance to not be poverty-stricken all their life.
Okay, are there any more comments about the vouchers in the charter schools? Let's move on to something else. There's a couple of things that I want to point out and talk specifically with some of the legislators. Senator Bell, you sponsored a bill that calls for placing cameras on the outside of buses. And I really like that, and because we know that so many times the bus stop sign is out and people run by it and endanger a child's life and may even take it, you know, it's just horrible to even think about. And I understand that 70% of the fines levied against those people would be coming back to the LEA. Okay.
Yeah, and that, I actually first heard about this from a Monroe County driver who I go to church with, who's now retired, about 3 years ago, and he said, hey, we got a problem, and the law, it's a traffic citation, not a criminal offense, so an officer actually has to witness it. A bus driver can witness a car running a stop sign all day long, but the bus driver cannot, you can't transfer that into a citation. And so Representative Brooks, who carries the bill in the House, he and I heard also from the Hal Taylor, who's the head of transportation for the Cleveland City school system. And we met with Hal a couple times this last summer and decided to introduce this bill. Now, there's going to be, as John and Jimmy and Randy would tell you, there's going to be some people who oppose traffic cameras of any kind, even on a school bus. And I've not even started moving this bill yet. I think it's going to be heard in education. I'm not sure in the House if it goes to transportation or education, John. I'm not sure which one it goes to.
I think it'll go to education administration and planning.
Okay, and, but we're hoping to be able, it's permissive. It would allow counties to put, cameras on their buses, and, then, you know, the biggest thing, we don't wanna see a child get killed.
No,
That's
no.
the biggest thing.
And I've seen too many situations out here on 411 that would just scare me to death.
Yeah.
And so,
And so that's hoping, hoping we can get the support to get that passed.
it sounds like a good bill.
Can I ask our representative a question?
Yes.
I did an article, I guess maybe about a month or so ago, and it was about being careful when buses stop, not passing buses. One of the things I included in the article was a penalty. Has it ever been given thought to toughening? I mean, I'll be quite honest with you. You pass a bus with the arm out, even if you're cited by a police officer, I'll be very honest, it's not a very stiff penalty put on the perpetrator. And I think maybe if it was looked at, it may be up a little bit, it might discourage a few people from doing that.
And forgive me for not remembering, and Janie may have it in front of her, this bill may do that, I just don't, I've got 110 bills, so I can't remember all the details on this one, but this bill may up the penalty on it as well. But yeah, that's something we need to do too. And
But they can do the camera, I mean, they can take the film from the camera and still charge them. They don't have to have a witness to it.
no, but a police officer then has to view the
Has to
film.
view
So
the-
the police officer would actually, whatever, if it was Monroe County Sheriff's Department or Madisonville City, wherever the ticket was given, they would actually have to issue the ticket after they viewed the film.
Okay, let's talk about that bill, John, that you've got before the legislature about the buses and the commercial license and so forth. You want to explain that?
Senator Bell and I have
Yes.
that bill. Maurice and I have conversed extensively about that bill. In 2015, the Attorney General opined that privately owned school buses had to be classified as vehicles for hire, which meant they had to buy a registration and had to buy a $322 a year license plate. When a bus that is publicly owned, for instance, the school board owns a tag in McMinn County for that 66 passenger bus costs $13.50. All buses, all school buses, prior to August of 2015, could use a $13.50 government tag. What happened with that opinion, or what gave rise to that opinion? Some contractors in another part of the state, nowhere here, had used their buses in competition with a commercial bus line. And they were running those buses with a $13.50 tag, taking business from a commercial bus line. So, a complaint was filed, and the Attorney General, of course, had to opine like he did. This particular bill says you can buy a $13.50 tag if you only use that bus per the contract that you've executed with the local school board. If you use it to haul children for whatever reason, whether it be a field trip or back and forth to school, you can buy a $13.50 tag. If you choose to haul people to a UT ball game on Saturday, you have to buy a commercial tag. We'd leave that up to the owner of the bus as to what kind of tag they could get.
What about if you cross the state line, like we have trips like go to Chattanooga, goes Ruby?
If you're doing that with school kids, $13.50.
The other state, I mean, the people, the contractors we have here, like, we've only got like one or two that can actually travel out of state, because you have to buy a different license, or,
Now that they've got commercial tags on there, I called Trooper Jackson, and he said that they're fine.
I know, when I was principal a few years ago, I got a contractor got a ticket for.
That's true.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. I didn't know that.
According to Trooper Carly Jackson, he
Good
said
deal.
now, because we just had it come up, I think it was due to a ball game that we were gonna have to
Right.
cross state lines, and I said, we've got commercial tags on our buses.
Okay.
He said, as long as you've got that on there, your buses will be covered.
We, when I was a practitioner, we had youngsters that would send to Florida every year during spring break baseball team. And they drove a county school bus, and we had never had an issue, had a government tag on it. So that purportedly, now I don't know whether that's a problem now, but it didn't used to be. But that's what this bill does. It quite simply puts school bus contractors in the same category as if the Board of Education owned the school buses. I couldn't understand why a school bus in McMinn County, where the buses are all publicly owned, could buy a $13.50 tag, and the very same school bus in Monroe County had to buy a $322.
See, we own like 10 special ed buses,
Yeah.
3 activity buses for the high schools.
Sure.
That's it.
Bradley County's that way as well, they contract drivers in
Yeah.
Bradley County too.
Okay, now, is that bill going to pass?
Well, I'll tell you the issue with
I
it.
love the bill, let's get
I
it
do
passed.
Absolutely. As far as we're concerned, it will.
Yeah, but,
Now, bear in mind, it has what's called a fiscal note, which means cash American, which means that's money the state won't get. That's,
The catch-22.
yeah. Now, also, my argument is that the fiscal note is somewhat theoretical, because prior to August 2015, it's money they didn't get anyway. But I think it's a good bill. If Monroe County owns a 72, or 66 or 72 passenger bus, school board owns it. You can put a $13.50 tag on it today.
I love
If a
that.
bus contractor in Coker Creek owns the very same bus, it costs them $322. That's the issue that I had with it. And we're gonna try to change it.
I mean, Jane Lynn mentioned another bill quickly that John and I had together, and it's going to allow schools to keep Narcan. Have you seen that bill? Narcan is an opioid antagonist.
Yeah, I did, I read that.
Okay, let's say you had a student had a drug overdose,
Right.
and literally they could just about be taking their last breath, and they can get this nasal inhalant, and it saves their life. Our emergency people, our EMS carrying it now, police officers, many police departments are carrying Narcan, and this will allow schools, it's not mandatory, it's permissive, but it'll allow schools to keep Narcan. There's a company out there that will give you your first twin dose. They have a grant program to give every high school the first dose free. It's $75 a dose. After that, I think the shelf life is 18 months. But if you have a child, again, experiencing overdose with little or no training, it's one of these foolproof drugs. You can give it to them and save their life. We passed one last year for EpiPens.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
And now the
yeah,
EpiPen,
the
the
EpiPen.
EpiPen actually, you can overdose on it. Narcan, you cannot. And it's literally almost fail-safe. And that's a bill that we've already passed in the Senate, and it's moving toward the House floor as well, which will allow schools to keep that drug on site.
And Narcan, I believe, is correct me if I'm wrong, is a generic term for Noxolone, which is a opioid antagonist.
That's right.
Narcan's a brain name.
That brand name. Narcan's the brand name. Yeah. Opioid antagonist would be the,
Noxolone is the generic, and it
Okay.
Yeah.
is opiate.
he's a pharmacist.
Yeah,
It is too.
yeah.
Anytime you give it, just be prepared, because they wake up just like that, and they're sometimes a little bit combative.
Yeah. Virginia passed this last year, and they actually called it the Lazarus Act because of the way it makes you come out.
Yeah. I've got a question now for Jimmy Matlock. You've got a bill about the restrooms in the locker room. Jimmy, you want to tell us about that?
Actually, the bill in question is I'm a co-sponsor too. It's a little more than a short answer, but the federal government, through some actions of our former president, sent down a directive that was basically unwound a few days ago by our current president. There are, however, still issues that we think, and I know it's debatable, with regard to the use of bathrooms. This would apply only in schools, K through 12. Now, realistically, the bill is off notice. It was this week, not moved in the Senate, so there's no action to be taken on the bill this year. What the attempt was here is to give direction to the local school through the state. And there's quite a discussion on the legal ramifications of do we or do we not even need this? Some argue that we don't. I would be in the camp that says we do. But for this year, the bill is dead.
It's dead, okay. All right, and there was another one about, and I need some explanation on this because I'm not sure I understood it. The Tennessee Student Free Expression Act.
I think that's Mark Daniels' bill, if I'm,
Tennessee Student Free Expression.
Yeah, that concerns higher education
Yeah, that's
and
higher
what,
ed.
yeah, it's a higher education, not a K-12
Okay.
education issue.
All right, that's
Yeah.
good. Okay, another thing that I've got on my mind is, well, there's two things. And I think, Mike, I think you had something to do with this maybe last year or the year before, talking about making sure that our history textbooks are true history and not with the progressive line flowing through them?
Right.
Okay. That,
Yeah, well, we reconstituted the textbook commission, and I mean, John can probably speak more to the specifics of this, but we have advisory committees. We set up a very transparent, open process to develop new standards. You know, Nathan James, who works for the Department of Education, was in my office just last week, they actually interviewed me, they recorded me about this bill, because he said other states are now looking to what Tennessee did with this, and because the system that we set up to develop these new standards has all these layers that allow for public input and input from teachers. You know, we had, I think Nathan said we had like 150,000, 160,000 comments on the standards, which were the math and science standards. We're just now getting into the history, to redoing the history standards. And 80% of the comments came from teachers. So teachers were the ones weighing in on what these new standards should be like, which is a great thing. It's what we wanted to hear from teachers. But it also allows the public to as well. And I think the new, again, they're just now starting the process. I'm looking at John, I think, to get started on the new history standards. And I think it's gonna lead to a unique textbook. I was talking to one of the textbook companies who said they're trying to develop a Tennessee-specific history book. We've never had that. Y'all know a lot more about the curriculum and how it's developed than I do, but everybody caters to California and Texas. Why? Because those are the two biggest markets. I'm glad to see a textbook company say, we're gonna make something for y'all, for Tennessee.
Well, I mean, you know, we have our Tennessee history.
Right. Well, this would be
a textbook
right.
produced in the state of Tennessee.
Not just produced in the Tennessee, but with a Tennessee focus. It's not a Tennessee history book, but it's a history book with a Tennessee focus. It's a little different.
Okay. That particular process has a number of different levels. First being public comments from anybody and everybody via the internet. Those comments are all taken and combined and included to a second echelon at that point in time of educators, of public school folk. They're then filtered on up and recommended, and then they come after the final version and all the filtering. Those chosen standards are put back on the website. So there's a lot of opportunity for public vetting.
And if we end up with something we don't like, we've got nobody to blame but ourselves for not making the comment, because the process is there for anybody in the state to weigh in on.
Another thing that is a pet peeve of mine, and actually I think all the school board, the members of this school board agree on, we'd like to see more money put in the CTE program. Especially, you've got welding rods and all that equipment and everything that you need, and it's expensive. And we know, and you know, not every kid is going to go to college. Now,
Or
they might
needs
go
to.
for this
That's
two-year
right.
technical training, but we also need to foster and get in enough career shadowing or whatever to expose them to different areas where, we need electricians, we need plumbers. And
That's in
so
the
we need more funds in that.
Lieutenant Governor McNally has helped a great deal with the current proposed budget that the governor has $15 million for career and technical education equipment update. And that has been needed for some time.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm confused
Well,
about history. How do you change, has there been books that have been put out that aren't true? I mean, history
Yeah.
that,
yeah, there's been a progressive lean to the history textbook. And you've got situations where and also.
give me an example. I've
Well,
never
okay.
taught history. I don't know much about history.
Okay, let's take the area of religions, for example. You've got more emphasis on Muslim than you do Christian religions. And there are things like that they have indicated that, 9/11 was not a terrorist attack. Now, these are just excerpts of things that I've gathered that have come across in email letters and things like that from other educators, that they're concerned about textbooks in our state.
So, okay, I wish I had read some of them. I feel ignorant when it comes to.
Well, I mean, it's hard to keep up with everything.
Well, I know, but, what we want is just truth in our textbook.
Yes,
I
that's
think
true. We
all
want true history. We don't want anything embellished. And I mean, and there's been attempts to take away, you know, they want to tear down statues because it was back during the Civil War time and things, but, and, you know, that was part of our history. Why do we want to destroy it? You know, and I'm thinking, let's leave it alone. You know, everybody's got to have a gripe about something. What was it I read the other day? Somebody was complaining about, oh, yeah, in England, the sign that says no smoking was a racist comment. I mean, you know, it gets ridiculous every now and then.
Janie, you may have House Bill 449 there.
No,
It's a bill that I brought at the behest of the Tennessee Organization of School Superintendents. I believe Representative Matlock's on that bill too, I believe. You may recall a year or so ago, there was a bill passed that gave each individual school a letter grade A through F.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
let's
wanted to
talk
ask about that.
Well, this particular bill, of course, it's got a couple of different categories. The first category, of course, speaks to the achievement, which is a scale score performance of a public school. The second category is the value added, which is the growth component. And then the third category is other educational opportunities that the State Department of Education may assign a grade A, B, C, D, or F in those three categories. But the overall composite score or summative score for a school will either be exemplary, above average, below average, low performing, or priority, instead of an A through F for an overall summative score. And that's there because it's, as you may know, in a public school, a report card may well have an A in achievement, which is a scale score, and a D or an F in growth in fourth grade math. That's very possible. Typically, schools in affluent areas have better achievement, lower growth. Typically, schools in rural areas, if you would, like Rogers Creek, can have a much higher growth score and a lower achievement score. So in an attempt to, rather than try to explain why you have an A in fourth grade math and achievement and a D in fourth grade math and growth, and try to explain that to people in a summative composite score for the entire school for all tested areas, then in my opinion, the exemplary for the extremely high performing and the priority for the low performing.
We all, I think, agree on that. We don't like
Yeah.
that label A through F.
Well, and you know, it's just very difficult. It's not necessarily about the label, but how in the world do you explain to somebody
That this kid's
that
gonna
you
go
run
to
into
F
on the
school.
street, how you got an A in fourth grade math, and oh, what, by the way, you also got an F in fourth grade math. And that can happen and does regularly.
I got one more question, Richard, maybe four more than that, but right now, right now, there's a bill out there that is, and it's maybe already died, about having, letting teachers carry guns in school or getting, besides just the officers. I mean, didn't we hear something about that in our,
There's
Hey, on
not,
the Hill.
there's not one for K-12, not that I've seen.
it was something about a bill
It's
allowing
in
teachers.
higher ed.
College.
Oh, is it
college.
college?
Yeah.
It's not
College,
high
yeah,
school?
it's not.
Okay,
No,
good.
no.
Well, I just saw something about
No,
that.
no.
So that's not even a possibility, that's
Yeah, I didn't think there was one out there.
Janie, one of the issues that will affect our community that Maurice may have talked to the board about, and we talk a lot in our transportation committees, is seatbelts. And
Okay.
I can't predict to this group how that will turn out, but I chaired that committee for a couple of years, and the debate was intriguing to me because it's not just so simple to think, well, everybody needs a seatbelt in the car. Everybody should have a seatbelt in the school bus. And you can argue the size of the child, the angle of the seat, the way a child would move if they had an injury or accident, to really it boils down to the tragedies we've had locally are exclusively driver error. So I know Maurice is having all kinds of challenges like we do in every district, getting drivers, getting consistent school bus routes and arrangements. So I don't know how that's gonna come at the end of the year, but it will be a lot of what takes up the last few weeks of our session, because you've got great argument on both sides, and you can find people who are, with best of intent, have completely contrasting views about that. So that will come before this board, and every school in the state at some stage is what do we do? You know, does the driver become also the enforcer? How does he drive and look in the mirror? Do you put a buckle, a sensor on every child? Does it apply to only new buses? Should it go back and make it retroactive? So lots of debate about that. That will be something we'll kind of stay tuned to, because it could have a huge fiscal
That's,
note for this community.
Yeah, who's gonna pay for it?
that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Are we gonna get any money for that?
Well, again, you know, there's lots of argument. Most people would come down to camps, you can't make it retroactive. It would just overwhelm the school and frankly the state.
Yeah.
Many people think we should be, you know, look at requiring new buses to come equipped with seatbelts. And then you say, well, what size seatbelt? Is it for a second grader or a ninth grader? And the angle of the seats, as we all know, is different on buses. So it's really a hard one to predict how it's gonna come out.
And, you know, I would add, and I've had a guy from here in Monroe County call me, a retiree, one of the nicest fellas. He calls me up about once every 6 months about this issue. And he thinks if we have to spend $100 million, we should do it, because, I mean, one child, how do you argue?
Exactly.
One child's life, what's it worth?
I heard.
Is it worth $100 million? And of course, when I try to come back with the statistics that I know John knows well, we talked about it before, school bus travel by far is the safest travel on the road, by far.
Oh, yeah.
500 students a year die being taken to school, and they're either driving their personal vehicle or riding with their parents. Now, we've had 2 very high-profile tragedies in the state of Tennessee in the last couple of years, but on average, 4 students die a year in a school bus. 500 die a year riding with their parents or driving their own car.
It hasn't been that long ago, in the last year or so, that the Department of Safety did not even recommend seatbelts on school buses. Not, and the fiscal note has absolutely nothing to do with it. But on a school bus, the ratio of adults to students may be 1 to 50. In a family car, it's 1 or 2 to 2 or 3. So absolutely and positively in a family vehicle, absolutely. But in an emergency setting, 1 to 50. It's kind of, and the thought being that a school bus driver in an emergency setting might be really challenged getting
Everybody else.
53rd graders unbuckled and out of the bus. So all those are considerations that you have to look at. That to me, the fiscal note is not the argument. I mean, just you can't put a price on a child's life. But I would hate to make, for instance, in a situation involving a school bus fire.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. So, having driven a bus some myself, I can identify with that.
Is there anybody else has a question? Any comment?
Jenny, I think we need to remember that for the first time ever in our community, we have the second most powerful man in the state. And he watches over us, be it Anderson County, Monroe County, Knox County, Loudoun County. And while he's with Mike there in the Senate, working through their legislation, he still has, I found, the heart of all of us in mind. And he's there advocating for us every day. So we are very, very fortunate to have right here among us a man who cares a lot. And I appreciate serving with him. And I tell you, he watches your budget close. He really does. So
He pinches it.
he pinches it, but he prioritizes. So I think he's due a lot of respect and appreciation. And I've learned to
Well,
understand how hard his job is.
I've known and watched Randy ever since 1978, so me and his brother-in-law Bob, and I have a great deal of respect for him because he has come up in the ranks, and he's very conservative, and he's very sensible and very common sense, which means a lot to me. And likewise, the rest of you guys, just if you happen to run into Mike Bell on Saturday morning, get out of his way because he's going to about 5 pancake breakfasts.
I'm going to one in the morning.
Every
They're Relay for Life
Relay for Life.
at Applebee's in Athens. Yeah.
And the Lions Club, by the way, in Edgewater.
Okay, there are 2 in 1. I won't make the Lions Club. I'll just make the Applebee's.
He's
Oh,
the
wow.
marathon pancake breakfast man. So, gentlemen, thank you so much
Well,
from
thank
all of
y'all.
us,
Thank you.
and we appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
I'm probably the only one here that's taught in the inner city. You're talking about Memphis. I taught in Gary, Indiana, and I've taught in the